Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for joining me for another video. We're talking about more fades, this time for the wide receiver and tight end positions. These are players I do not have very much exposure to in all the drafts that I have done thus far and do not plan on changing it. I just think that they are overvalued at their current ADPs. Before we get into that, I would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe on the video. It helps me out so very much. We're trying to get to my first 500 subscribers and you can be a part of that. Click that button below and join the press. Now with that done, let's first hop into the two tight ends that I am avoiding. And guys, this is really not about me not liking these players. It's more so about how I want to build my rosters. And I found that when I take these guys as early as they are going, it hurts my roster construction overall. And I do not like passing up on those running backs and those wide receivers early on, those elite talents. So the first guy is Travis Kelsey. ADP of 14, he's right after that first round. I've seen him go in the first round before as the tight end 1 overall. And I get the upside with Kelsey. I'm sure he's going to see a massive target share there. He's going to get all the work he can handle. He has a leg up, there's no doubt about it, at the tight end position. But when you look at people that you're passing up potentially to draft him there, you have DeAndre Swift going just one pick after, who I love. Stephon Diggs is just a pick before. Nick Chubb is there, Alvin Kamara, CeeDee Lamb, to name a couple. I would have all of those guys rather than have Kelsey on my roster for just the fact that by getting a tight end, I really handcuff myself at those other positions. Now, I do love taking higher end tight ends. I want one of the first 6 tight ends this year. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at the next guys up after we go from Kelsey, and Andrews is the other guy that I'm avoiding with an ADP of 23 and tight end 2. Those are the first 2 rounds we're talking about having to take these guys in, and that is just too big a price to pay for me. Now, where I do like taking a tight end is Kyle Pitts in the middle, maybe the end of round 3. I think he's a much better value there. He's got similar upside from what we saw last year and an ability to break out and take that next step. And then if we drop it down a little further, I really like Darren Waller where he's at. I know that there are some concerns with his injury, but Dalton Schultz is another tight end option that you can get far later in drafts where you can stack those running backs and those wide receivers first, get your roster in a position where then you can take that tight end later. And it just seems to work out better for me. So if that's not your style and you really like having the stability at tight end, go for it. It is just not for me. And these are both guys that I think, as far as Kelsey and Andrews, that I would much rather wait on a tight end and get that 3 to 6 range than I would spend a top 2 pick on them. With my little tight end run out of the way, let's get into our wide receivers. And the first wide receiver that I am avoiding at current ADP is DK Metcalf, currently going in the top 50 as the wide receiver 19. Now, if you watched my Fade the Running Backs video, you heard me talk about the Seahawks offense. And that is a big part of why I do not like DK Metcalf this year. I just think that there is very little upside when we're talking about this offense. That is what I'm looking for, especially when you're paying a wide receiver 2 price. You're gonna have to take Metcalf in the middle of the 5th round, sometimes in the 4th round, and that is just far too steep for me. When we look at what makes Metcalf a dangerous weapon in fantasy football, it is the touchdowns that have kept him afloat. And I do not see a path where he's going to have anything close to double-digit touchdowns in this offense. There's just not going to be that many passing scores to go around. Would it really surprise you if the combination of Drew Lock and Geno Smith threw for 15, 18 touchdowns a game. So is DK going to get half of the passing touchdowns in that Seattle offense? I mean, it is certainly possible, but it is not something that I want to bet on, and I am not willing to pay that wide receiver 19 price, regardless of how awesome he is. I did a video, a short on Metcalf, talking about some of the negatives, and I think those still hold true. He is someone that I am not exposed to pretty much at all in the drafts I've done thus far. Now, the next guy that I'm looking at is Amari Cooper, wide receiver 26, currently going as a 65th overall player. Obviously, a big part of this is that Deshaun Watson suspension being 11 games. By the time that's done, you are basically gearing up for the fantasy football playoffs. So if you think you can survive 11 weeks with Amari Cooper there as your fringe wide receiver 2, more power to you, but it is not something that I want any part of on my rosters. Now, I will say if you're in best ball and you want that boost towards the end of the year, it makes a lot more sense. But otherwise, Amari Cooper's upside is severely capped in this offense with Jacoby Brissett. Now, Cooper is someone who's probably going to get close to 1,000 yards because he's going to see so many targets. But once again, it's about that lack of upside. This is going to be a very run-heavy team. They have a great offensive line, and I think that they are going to lean on that with Chubb and Hunt in the backfield, which means scoring opportunities could be few and far between for Cooper, and he hasn't really been an elite touchdown producer anyway thus far in his career. He's also getting a little bit older, and so that's just another red flag for me. Cooper is someone that I am avoiding. The next guy is Hunter Renfro, who's got an ADP of 85. He is going fringe wide receiver 3 territory as the wide receiver 35 off of boards. And I just do not see Renfro being able to replicate what he did last year. So many things had to go right for Renfro to really break out towards the end of last year. Now, I do love him as a player, but I do not want him as a fantasy asset. You look at what happened last year when he broke out. Darren Waller went down with an injury, and he basically got every single target that he could possibly handle. And he also had his touchdown production buoyed by that. Now, he is the third option in this offense behind Devontae Adams and Darren Waller. I just don't see Renfro as someone who has a ton of upside in this offense. I think he's going to do fine and probably catch 5-6 balls a game, but it could be for 45 or 50 yards. And that doesn't exactly help you out a ton. It's going to be Waller and it's going to be Adams in close in the red zone. And without those opportunities, Renfro becomes more of a wide receiver 4 for me than he does a true wide receiver 3 option as he is currently being drafted. Next up is DeAndre Hopkins, and I may get a lot of hate for this as far as Nuke because his ADP isn't horrible when you look at it. He's just a couple spots after Hunter Renfro. He's wide receiver 37, going into that top 100 at 96 overall. But this is really the same premise as I talked about with the tight ends. It's all about roster construction here for me. And when you look at Hopkins, we know he's missing the first 6 games. What that means is your roster spot with Hopkins is locked in. You're not moving him for those first 6 weeks. And all of those players who are potential breakouts, the Cordero Pattersons of last year, you're not going to have that extra roster spot to go after them because Nuke is sitting there. And for me, I want those opportunities to go off those breakout players in weeks 1, 2, and 3 because that can change your season and it can put your team over the top. And if you're sitting on a player like Hopkins, no matter how great he is, it just handcuffs you from a roster building standpoint. And I do not want to deal with that type of headache. Nuke's someone I would much rather maybe make a trade offer for weeks 3, 4, or 5 when we've already seen those players break out and had a chance to get them on my team. And maybe they don't bite, and that sucks, but it is much better than burning a roster spot, which is so valuable for the first, third half of the season prior to your playoffs. We also have to look at Nuke's target share and the decline of it over the last couple of years, he hasn't been quite the same guy that he was. And when he comes back from that suspension, I wouldn't be super surprised if we found Nuke more as a high-end wide receiver 2 than, you know, a high-end wide receiver 1. And so is it really worth burning a roster spot for 6 games when we are not getting peak Nuke? We also have Marquis Brown there now. He is going to be more involved. Cliff Kingsbury has already talked ad nauseum over and over again about how much he wants to get Rondale Moore involved as well. So there's much more of a threat to his target share than we've seen in years past. And we also have to burn a spot for a significant amount of time. So for me, I'm going to let someone else draft Nuke. I'm going to see if I can make a deal for him that's decent for me. And if not, we live with the outcome. But I do not like the way that my roster turns out and how I have to manage it by taking a player like Nuke. The last guy I have on my list is Chase Claypool. And this is for a couple reasons, because he is going fairly late in drafts. He's wide receiver 45, just inside the top 120 at 119 overall. First and foremost, we know about George Pickens. We've heard about the breakout and the potential there, and that's fine, but it's not just about that. What exactly are we hoping for by taking Chase Claypool? Because we know he's not the wide receiver 1. The target hog in this offense is going to be Deontay Johnson. So we're trying to buy the wide receiver 2, maybe the wide receiver 3, depending on what happens with Pickens, on an offense that is not projected to be great. I'm not super excited about either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. And so what are we hoping to get when we're taking Chase Claypool? The upside here is basically non-existent for me. We've seen him already deal with injuries over the last couple of years. Najee Harris is going to get a ton of work in the running game and in the receiving game as well. And so between Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris, sprinkle in a little bit of Pickens as well, there isn't a whole lot left for Claypool in a below average offense, most likely. If there's no upside, I want no part in it. When you look at players that are going around him, just the next wide receiver on the board as far as ADP is Kadarius Tony. He has massive upside in the Giants offense as the potential wide receiver 1. So how's a player like that going later than Claypool, whose best case scenario is he maybe flirts with 800 yards and scores 4 or 5 touchdowns? I just don't understand the pull from him, and he is someone that I am basically avoiding when it comes my turn later on in the drafts. And that's all that I have for you guys for the video today. It was short and sweet. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if you need any help with any trades, whatever, drop it all down below. I will help you out as best I can. I love the engagement. It is why I do this. A like, a subscribe on the video is always so very appreciated. I cannot thank my current subscribers enough for all of the support that I have already received. Love you guys and could not do it without you. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and we will see you next time.